Let's be honest, the Olympic marathon is usually not the highlight of the marathoning year. It's sometimes run at strange times. It's often just not the best marathon. There have been good marathons in the past, in past Olympics, but generally speaking, it's not the highlight of the Olympics. However, this year in the 2024 Paris Olympic Games, the men's and women's marathon were absolutely outstanding. Some of the most interesting and best racing that I've seen in a big city marathon, as well as one of the most picturesque courses I've ever seen in any big city marathon. It was absolutely outstanding, and there's a lot to go over here. And if you're interested in my thoughts on just the Olympics in general from a shoe perspective, stick around to the end and I'll have my big idea there. The first thing we need to talk about here is the course. Usually talking about the course in most world major marathons is not something we need to do because they're either very known, like Boston and New York, or they're just flat and they're fast. But this course was something totally different that we've never really seen in a big world major level elite marathon. Now, this course was announced about 2 years ago. I believe October 2022 was when this course was announced. And I vaguely remember people commenting on it, like it's interesting, or it's too hilly, whatever it is. But I didn't really pay attention until maybe about a year ago, when a lot of that commentary in running online really started to hone in on the course and really complain about the course. It was unfair. It was poorly designed. The hills in the middle of the course were just, they shouldn't be there. And that made me pay attention to the course. So I looked at the course map. I remember looking at the elevation profile. I remember being, oh, that's interesting, but not really thinking much of it until a couple weeks ago, when that uproar really started to pick up about people complaining online about the Olympic marathon course. But the course that I saw the athletes run on was absolutely outstanding. And the thing that I don't really understand is why do big city marathon courses all need to be flat and sort of cookie cutter and all fast? I find courses that have some local character or bring you through the local sort of topography of the area to be far more interesting. To me, that's why New York City and Boston stand out among the world major marathon courses, because they're unique, they're interesting, they're iconic. And I think this course is up at that level. And the hills in the middle of it, these hills starting around 21K, and especially the crazy hill at about 29K to about 30K, really about 600 meters at about the 28.5 mark, was absolutely crazy. Just to give you some perspective, that climb at 28.5 kilometers was 10.5% gradient. Now, in the Tour de France, to have a beyond category climb, a hard climb, that's going to be anything over an 8% gradient. Granted, they're doing that over 15K or more. That's also the requirement. You're not doing that in a marathon, but a 10.5% gradient going up is absolutely crazy. And some of the coverage of it, seeing people hitting this wall of that course, was absolutely crazy, going up and then going down. But it made for some really interesting racing. And I think the way the athletes tackled it was really fascinating, not only leading up to it, but what happened after in both the men's and women's race. The other thing I find really interesting about this type of racing is I like marathons with elites in it where there's no pacers and it's a challenging course, because I think that's much more interesting racing. Courses and marathons with pacers, yeah, they might be faster and you might see world record times and all that, but I find racing where there's no pacers on a challenging course way more interesting. And this one really proved that stuff beyond a doubt. If you're interested in more about the course, I'll put a few links in the description that really explain the history of the course, why it was designed the way it was, and it gives you a good overview of the elevation profile of the course. Moving to the men's marathon, I think my first observation here, at least from a super shoe standpoint, was that I kind of saw every super shoe available in this course. Yes, I think there were more Alphafly 3s and Adidas Evo 1s than really anything else, but there still was pretty much every brand represented in this course. I don't think there was any brand that I didn't see on an athlete's feet from some country. Maybe one or two, I don't need to single them out, but generally there was a ton of range here, and it was all really interesting to see. Tola's victory in the Adidas Evo 1 gave Adidas the victory in the marathon, continues the sort of, I would say, dominance the Evo 1 has had since it was released at Berlin last year. It's been a great year for the Evo 1. Interestingly, though, also about Tola, he was a replacement for Cisse Lemma, who, when I saw the course profile, was who I thought was actually going to win this race, but he had to drop out about 2 weeks before the race because of injury, and Tola was his replacement. And Tola drops in and has an amazing race. It was really wonderful to see. He was very patient in the first 25K. He really stepped it up on those hills, especially on the big one at 28.5K. And from that point on, they rubber band a little bit, but they never really got within 9 or 10 seconds from him for the rest. I think there was a water station where they kind of came together again, but then Tola took off from there. And that's how the race ended. But it was a really strategic race. It was really interesting to see. And he ran a very commanding race. And he really put the hammer down on the hill, because on that big 10.5% gradient hill that I mentioned, he really powered up it. His form was strong. He was very well prepared for it. Not that there weren't other athletes prepared for it, but he was really there. And more importantly, going down the hill, he was super smooth, and his stride was actually really nice. So he was ready for that hill, and he really took the lead from that point on. Really great race, so congratulations to Tola for the victory. The next big story really is Kipchoge, and I think there's two stories here. The first one was that Kipchoge was running in a custom pair of electric Alphafly 2s, really cementing the fact that the Alphafly 2 was truly Eliud Kipchoge's shoe. And that really explains why we literally saw no other elite race in that shoe. Yes, there was one or two, and a lot of the people that Eliud trains with and Kipchoge also wear it, but from an elite level, we never really saw many people racing in that shoe, which really says to me that the Alphafly 2 was specifically tailored to Eliud Kipchoge's taste. If you ever wanted the Kipchoge Air, that's the Alphafly 2. And the fact that Nike made him an electric colorway Alphafly 2 is pretty incredible. The next story was his performance, dropping out at 31K. Now, Eliud has never really done hilly marathons well. He likes flat and fast. And this was probably the absolute worst course for him. But at the same time, his past few marathons have not really gone well. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes from here. He was very clear this will be his last Olympic marathon. But I'm curious if we'll actually see him line up in another world major marathon again. He is an asset to the sport. He is an ambassador to the sport. He is great for road running and marathon running, and I hope he stays around in that capacity, but we'll see where his racing goes. Now, the third thing here really is about the shoes again. When he dropped out at 31K, he did a very classy thing. He waited for the Mongolian runner, who was the only other runner behind him, to pass him. He cheered him on. That was last place. That was the end of the field. After that, Eliud sort of hung out and said hi to people in the crowd and gave away his shoes, signed his shoes, his socks. Like, he was a gentleman congratulating the last place runner, also I think the oldest runner in the field, and he was just spending time with fans. Really class act. And whoever got those Alphafly 2s, those electric Alphafly 2s, those are going to be a one-of-one thing that we're going to see pop up at auction at some point in the years ahead, and they're going to be very valuable. I assume each shoe went to a different person, but if those two got together and now one person has both pairs that are both signed by Eliud, those things are going to be invaluable in about 10 years. As an American, seeing Conor Mantz and Clayton Young's race and them finishing Mantz in 8th, Clayton in 9th was really great to see. It's great to see some Americans really at the front of this whole race, especially Conor Mantz. Now, his first 25K or so, he was right up there. He was in the lead many times. He was very much present at the front of the race, and that was great to see. The hills knocked them both back a little bit, but again, they hung on and they had a great finish. Again, Conor in 8th, Clayton in 9th. And what was super cool to see was that they hung around at the finish line and really congratulated all the runners that were coming after them. It was like the American Welcome Committee at the Olympic Marathon. Really interesting, classy move. Really good to see. It was also good to see Conor Mantz in a pair of Alphafly 3s. He wasn't in older shoes. and Clayton in his Metaspeed Sky Paris shoes. Again, the one that he said many times that he really likes, especially for this type of racing. So congratulations to both of them. They had a great race. Moving to the women's marathon, I think the big story from a shoe perspective for me was that, again, I saw a lot of different shoes. And in fact, I probably saw more shoes in the women's marathon than I did in the men's. And there was already a ton on the men's side. And there were probably a few less Alphafly 3s. I think there were probably about the same Evo 1s, but there was some just other shoes that I didn't see. More Pumas. I did see some more Solomons. I just saw a lot of different shoes. So again, it's really good to see a wide range of shoes in these global level elite races. And without a doubt, the biggest story to me of the women's race was the quality of the women's race. How that field, especially the three finishers, really stuck together really until the final 1.5K or so, through that leading into the hills, up and over the hills. It was really great to see that type of racing. I know a lot of people probably consider that very boring, but again, it was a very strategic race to see how they worked off one another, but also to see how they handled the course. And the finish of it was absolutely incredible. And this is where Hassan's race is even more impressive. Also, the fact that she ran the 5,000 meter and the 10,000 meter on the track, got bronze in both of those, and then here she was in the marathon. Now, she hung back the entire race. She was very patient. She was very poised. She ran the way she always runs, which means she's off the back and it looks like she's struggling, but she's really not. She just ran a very patient, very considered race. She hung with everything. She countered any move, any jostling. She was always there. And again, that last, I would say 3K, especially the last 1.5K into the finish, and how she really outkicked Asefa to get to the finish line and get a Olympic record on the course by about 6 seconds was absolutely fantastic. And even where there was a little sort of struggle where they sort of were right in the barrier and it looked like there was some contact, that was just racing incident. It was just cutting off the tangent of the corner. Hassan was trying to get past. They both seemed totally good with it. Post-race, they were, on good terms. So just a racing incident couldn't help it to happen because, again, there was a little kink in the course there. But excellent finish, and Hassan had an excellent Olympics, not only, again, the marathon, but also a bronze in the 5,000 meter and a bronze in the 10,000 meter. She is really an exceptional runner in these events. I know there was some expectations for Fiona O'Keefe to do well in this race, but she started obviously injured. She had a really good post on Instagram, which I'll link in the description, explaining the situation, explaining why she started. Really heartfelt. I feel awful for her, but again, that's racing. You just never know how it's going to go on race day. And unfortunately, she just did not have the race day or the lead into race day that she really wanted. So overall, the entire situation with her and then the sub that was called in that couldn't race because they actually made the decision past the deadline. Very tragic. Again, check out the post from her that I linked in the description. She really gets into it. Dakota Lindwurm's race was actually really good to see in the fact that she was leading around 23K very commandingly, and she was kind of present up there for some time. It was really great to see. It's great to see her and great to see an American, again, pushing the pace and being up there in the front of the race, especially with such a stacked field that the women's race actually had. And lastly, for both the men's and women's races, it was really nice to see how the course was closed off for the entire course. Very well gated, very well marked. Very, very well done. But more importantly, the fact that the crowds were basically at least 2 or 3, sometimes much more deep across almost the entire course for both the men's and women's races was really excellent to see. Often with these big city marathons and with the Olympic marathon, we don't really see that kind of support, but this one was really great to see everyone come out and support it because these runners really put on a show on a very challenging course, and they all did exceptionally well. And overall, from a shoe perspective for the 2024 Paris Olympic Games, I think the big story here was that there really wasn't a big shoe story here. Now, a lot of online media, I wouldn't call it mainstream media, but not running media, even though I did see this a little bit in running media, still pulled out all the stories about shoe tech is cheating, Nike got banned for cheating, this, like all of this stuff that we've seen for the past 5, 6, 7 years. They just recycled it again for clicks this year around, trying to, I guess, get clicks, but also drum up some sort of controversy. Even though when you watch the events, you watched all the athletics or track and field events, plus all the other triathlon, race walking, all the other events like that, you did see predominantly Nike and Adidas, but that's because Nike and Adidas have the biggest budgets to sponsor the most athletes or the most federations. So of course you're going to see Nike and Adidas really kind of go head to head. That's how it's been for 50 years now. But you saw a lot of other brands, and I don't think really any athlete was in a disadvantage because of equipment in this Olympics. I still think there was probably an advantage for Nike in the Tokyo Games, and there definitely was one in the Rio Games. But now I think it's pretty even. I think all these shoe brands kind of have similar tech. Yes, there may be a couple that are better than others. And again, I think Nike and Adidas are maybe just slightly still above everyone else, but it's not that far off. And it's not far enough where a good athlete running in a non-Nike or Adidas spike or marathon shoe can't compete anymore. I think those days are gone. So I think overall for running and from a shoe perspective, I think it's great because we do finally seem like we have parity across all brands in running. And it's about time because it's really great. But that parity that we have in 2024, I actually don't know how long it's going to last. I think in the next games in 2028 in LA, we probably will be talking about certain brands having an advantage again. And I think people are going to be surprised what brands are going to be. I think Nike and Adidas are still going to be at the top of that conversation, but I think there's going to be a couple other brands that we're going to be seeing athletes saying there's somewhat of an unfair advantage there from some perspective. So as I've been saying on this channel, I do think there's a big shakeup coming in running shoes from a tech perspective. And I think we're really going to see that really come to full flourish in the 2028 LA Olympic Games. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this content useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If you already are a subscriber, I now have enabled memberships on this channel. Click the join button below the video title, or if you're on an iOS device, use the link in the video description to find out more about memberships here. Neither one of those options are great. Leave a like on this video, leave a comment, because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.